Imagine you work your entire life to get to the top. You sacrifice weekends, you miss birthdays, you push through failure after failure. And then one day, you make it. You're powerful, you're successful. People listen when you speak. Doors open before you even knock. And then someone who loves you looks you in the eyes and says, "I don't feel like I know you anymore." That sentence has ended more marriages, destroyed more friendships, and broken more families than almost any other force in human life. And the terrifying thing? The person who hears it usually has no idea what happened. Because power does something to people. Something quiet, something slow, something almost invisible. Until it isn't. Today, we're going to talk about exactly what that something is. This video isn't about bashing successful people. It's not a hit piece on CEOs or politicians or celebrities. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. It's about understanding a deeply human trap, one that catches smart, driven, even well-meaning people completely off guard. We're going to look at the psychology, the neuroscience, and the real-world patterns behind why the higher someone climbs, the harder it often becomes for them to feel and be felt by the people they love. And if you've ever felt disconnected from someone powerful in your life, a parent, a partner, a boss, this might explain everything. Let's get into it. Section 1, the empathy erosion. Here's where we start. Empathy. Most of us think empathy is either something you have or you don't, like eye color. But that's not how it works. Empathy is more like a muscle. And just like a muscle, if you stop using it in certain ways, it atrophies. Now here's what power does. When you're in a position of authority, when you're making big decisions, managing large teams, running a company, holding office, your brain literally shifts its operating mode. Researchers at the University of California, Berkeley, and Sukhvinder Obi's lab at McMaster University ran studies that showed something stunning. Power changes how the brain's mirror neuron system works. Mirror neurons are the biological machinery behind empathy. The cells that fire when you see someone else in pain, and you feel it too. In powerful people, that system becomes less active. Let that sink in. It's not that powerful people choose to stop caring. Their brains, shaped by years of being in command, of having to make decisions without emotional interference, literally begin to process other people's emotions differently. Think about what success demands. When you're climbing the ladder, emotional detachment is often rewarded. You can't cry in the boardroom. You can't let a friend's bad week stop you from closing a deal. You have to be rational, decisive, unsentimental. So you train yourself, and your brain listens. The result? By the time you reach real power, you may have spent decades systematically dampening your emotional sensitivity. Not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. And then you go home and wonder why conversations feel shallow. Section 2, the feedback loop problem. Here's the second thing that happens, and this one is sneaky. When you have power, people stop telling you the truth. I don't mean they lie to you outright, though that happens too. I mean they soften things. They hedge. They tell you what you want to hear. They laugh at jokes that aren't funny. They agree with opinions they privately think are wrong. They don't share problems because they don't want to burden you, or because they're scared of your reaction. This has a name in psychology: impression management. And it happens automatically, instinctively, in almost every social interaction involving hierarchy. Now think about what this does to a powerful person over time. If everyone around you is filtering what they share, you stop getting calibrated feedback about how you come across. You stop learning when you've hurt someone. You stop hearing, "Actually, you were wrong about that." You stop being challenged in the ways that keep emotional intelligence alive. There's even a term for this in organizational behavior: the CEO bubble, or more broadly, the power bubble. It describes the insulating layer of deference that forms around anyone with significant authority. And here's the cruel irony. The more powerful you become, the more everyone else manages their behavior around you, which means you get less authentic human interaction, not more. You get performance. You get strategy. You get what people think you want. What you don't get anymore is realness, and realness is the only thing emotional connection is made of. Section 3, the time famine. Let's talk about something more obvious, but no less devastating. Time. Powerful people are almost universally time poor in ways that other people can barely imagine. We're not talking about being busy. Everybody's busy. We're talking about the kind of relentless scheduling where your calendar is booked 3 months out, your phone buzzes 200 times a day, and your mental bandwidth is so consumed by high-stakes problems that by the time you sit down at the dinner table, you're basically a shell. Emotional connection doesn't happen in grand gestures. Research by Dr. John Gottman, the relationship psychologist who's probably studied marriages more carefully than anyone alive, consistently shows that the quality of a relationship comes down to what he calls small moments of attunement. A hand on the shoulder, noticing someone seems off today, laughing at the same stupid thing, remembering what your partner mentioned worrying about last Tuesday. These aren't dramatic moments. They're quiet, they're quick, they're easy to miss, but they're everything. And when your life is structured around high-stakes demands, those moments disappear. You're there, physically present, but mentally, you're somewhere else entirely. In a negotiation, replaying a tough conversation, planning 3 moves ahead. The people who love a powerful person often describe this as being alone together. They're in the same room, but they're not in the same world. Section 4, identity merger and the loss of vulnerability. Now we get to what I think is the deepest layer of this. When someone becomes powerful, something happens to their sense of self. Gradually, or sometimes without them even noticing, their identity begins to merge with their role. They stop being a person who does a powerful job. They start being the job. The CEO who doesn't know who he is without the title, the politician who's never fully off, the celebrity who's performed a version of themselves for so long, they've forgotten what the original looked like. And here's why this destroys emotional connection. Real intimacy, the kind that makes people feel truly seen and loved, requires vulnerability. And vulnerability requires a self that isn't performing. It requires you to be able to say, I'm scared. I was wrong. I don't know what I'm doing. I need you. But for many powerful people, those words become almost physically impossible to say because they've spent years building an identity that is the opposite of uncertain. They've built the brand of competence and control, and that brand doesn't have a soft side. So they come home to the people who should know them best, and they put on the same armor they wear everywhere else because they don't know how to take it off anymore. And the people who love them can feel the armor. They can feel they're not getting the real person. They're getting the executive, the authority, the persona. And you cannot connect deeply with a persona. Section 5, what this does to the people around them. Let's flip the perspective for a minute. What is it actually like to be close to someone powerful who's lost emotional connection? People describe it in strikingly similar ways across cultures, across industries, across generations. They say things like, I felt like I was always auditioning. I could never just be sad around them. Everything had to be solved. They were generous with money and completely absent with attention. I felt like I was bothering them by having feelings. This is one of the most painful ironies of power. The very people who were originally motivated by love, who worked hard to give their family a better life, to make their parents proud, to build something that mattered, often end up making the people they love feel unseen, unheard, and ultimately alone. Not because they stopped loving them, but because love, like any living thing, requires tending. It requires presence. It requires the willingness to be moved by another person's reality, not just to solve their problems, but to sit with their experience. And the machinery of power is almost perfectly designed to prevent exactly that. Section 6, can it be reversed? So here's the question everyone's been waiting for. Is this reversible? Can powerful people reconnect? Yes, but it requires something that power actively discourages. Deliberate, sustained humility. Not fake humility, Not the performed modesty of someone who knows they're impressive. Real humility, the kind that says, the people in my life know things about me that I've stopped being willing to hear, and I need to listen. Studies on executive coaching, couples therapy, and leadership development consistently show the same thing. Reconnection happens when powerful people consciously create protected spaces where their roles don't exist, where they're not the boss, not the expert, not the decision maker, just a person with another person. This might mean therapy. It might mean a weekly ritual with a partner where phones don't exist. It might mean asking someone you love, how have I been making you feel lately? And then actually sitting with the answer instead of fixing it. It also requires what psychologists call re-engaging the nervous system with slow connection. Powerful people are often addicted to urgency. Everything needs to happen now and at scale, but love doesn't scale. Connection doesn't happen at the speed of business. You have to slow down enough to let another person's reality land. Here's what I want to leave you with. Power is not the villain of this story. Ambition isn't the villain. Drive isn't the villain. The villain, and if there is one, is unconsciousness. The danger isn't becoming successful. It's becoming successful and never asking, what am I becoming in the process? And what am I leaving behind? The most powerful people in history who also managed to be deeply loved, the ones who built empires and kept their humanity, were people who treated their inner life and their relationships with the same seriousness they gave their work. They didn't leave connection to chance. They chose it, again and again. Especially when it was inconvenient. Especially when they were tired. Especially when everything else was demanding their attention. Because they understood something essential. No achievement fills the space left by a person who stopped feeling known. If this video made you think of someone, or maybe made you think of yourself, share it. Start the conversation. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a powerful person can do is simply say, I've been away. Tell me how you've been. Don't forget subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications.